Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Life-Changing True Stories today. I bring you a powerful and deeply loving story, Asterisk. The rain tapped softly against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Julian Blackwood's penthouse apartment on Michigan Avenue. Emma Rodriguez stood in the middle of his pristine living room, clutching a small white envelope in her trembling hands. Inside was the ultrasound image that would change everything. She had rehearsed this moment 100 times. During the elevator ride up, in her mind, Julian would be surprised, maybe even scared at first. But eventually they would figure it out together. They had been together for 6 months after all. 6 months of late-night dinners, weekend getaways, and whispered promises. But the man standing before her now, adjusting his designer watch with cold precision, bore little resemblance to the Julian who had held her hand at the Navy Pier just last weekend. "You cannot be serious right now," Julian said, his voice flat and emotionless. He did not even look at the ultrasound image she had placed on his glass coffee table. "This is the absolute worst timing, Emma." Emma felt her heart hammering against her ribcage. "I know it is unexpected, but we can make this work. I have been thinking about it, and with my job at the marketing firm, I can work from home part of the time, and you have resources that could help us." Julian laughed, but there was no warmth in the sound. It was sharp and cutting, like broken glass. He walked to his bar cart and poured himself 2 fingers of expensive scotch, still refusing to meet her eyes. "Resources," he repeated, taking a slow sip. "Is that what you think this is about? Money?" "No. I just meant that we would not be alone in this. We have each other, and your family has connections that could help with childcare, or maybe even flexible working arrangements at Blackwood Industries." Now Julian did look at her, and what Emma saw in those steel-gray eyes made her blood run cold. There was no love there, no partnership, only calculation and dismissal. "Let me be very clear about something. Emma, I am 32 years old, in position to take over the entire Blackwood empire within the next 2 years. My father has been grooming me for this role since I was 16. Do you have any idea what that means? The board meetings, the international deals, the 18-hour workdays? But Julian, families can work around careers. Plenty of successful people have children and manage their professional lives." He set down his glass with a sharp clink. "Successful people with planned pregnancies. Emma, with wives who come from the right families and understand the demands of this world. You work in marketing at a mid-tier firm. You live in a studio apartment in Logan Square. You drive a 10-year-old Honda. Do you honestly think you are equipped for the kind of life I am building?" Each word was like a physical blow. Emma felt tears welling up in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not in front of him. "I thought you cared about me," she whispered. "You said I was different from the others. You said I made you feel like a real person, not just a corporate machine." "I said a lot of things," Julian replied, his tone suggesting that those things had been nothing more than convenient lies. "We had fun together, Emma. I enjoyed our time. But that does not mean I signed up for this level of complication." He walked to his desk and pulled out a checkbook. The sound of the pen scratching across paper, the only noise in the suddenly suffocating room. "I am writing you a check for $50,000, he said without looking up. "That should more than cover the procedure and any recovery time you need. There is a private clinic in the Gold Coast that my family has used before for discreet matters. I will have my assistant send you the information tomorrow." Emma stared at the check he was holding out to her, feeling like she might be sick. "You want me to get rid of our baby?" "I want you to make the practical choice," Julian corrected. "The choice that makes sense for both of our futures. You are 26 years old, Emma. You have your whole life ahead of you. You can find someone more suitable. Someone who actually wants kids and a white picket fence. That person is not me. It never was. What if I do not want to make that choice? What if I want to keep this baby?" Julian's expression hardened even further if that was possible. He set the check down on the coffee table next to the ultrasound image and straightened his tie. "Then you will be completely on your own. I will deny paternity. My lawyers are among the best in the city, and they will make absolutely certain that you cannot prove a thing. My family has resources you cannot even imagine, Emma. We can make problems disappear." The threat was veiled but unmistakable. Emma felt something inside her break, and then immediately begin to rebuild itself into something harder, something more resilient. "I do not want your money, Julian. Do not be stupid," he snapped. "Take the check. At least be smart enough to accept help when it is offered." Emma looked at the check one more time. At the ultrasound image of the tiny life growing inside her, and then back at the man she had thought she loved. She realized with painful clarity that she had never really known him at all. "Goodbye, Julian," she said quietly, turning toward the door. "If you walk out that door without taking that check, do not come back," he called after her. "I mean it, Emma. I will have security block you from the building. You will not be able to reach me. This is your last chance to be reasonable." Emma paused at the door, her hand on the cold metal handle. For just a moment, she considered turning back, considered begging him to reconsider, to remember the good times they had shared. But then, she felt a flutter deep in her belly. So faint, she might have imagined it, and she knew what she had to do. "I hope someday you realize what you are giving up," she said, without turning around. "Not me. I know I am not what you want. But this baby deserves better than a father who would rather pretend it does not exist." She walked out, letting the door close softly behind her. Only when she was in the elevator, descending 27 floors back to reality, did she allow the tears to fall. Building a new life, the next 6 months were the hardest of Emma's life. She worked her regular 9-to-5 job at the marketing firm and spent her evenings doing freelance graphic design work from her tiny apartment. Every penny went into savings for the baby. She sold her beloved record collection, her vintage jewelry, to anything that might bring in a few extra dollars. Her apartment in Logan Square became both her sanctuary and her prison. The walls were thin enough that she could hear her neighbors' conversations, but it was home. She painted the corner near the window a soft yellow and assembled a secondhand crib she found at a thrift store. Her best friend from college, Teresa, threw her a small baby shower with 3 guests and homemade decorations. Emma's mother had passed away when she was 19, and her father had remarried and moved to Florida, effectively exiting her life. She had some cousins scattered across the Midwest, but none she was close to. She was truly alone in this, and the weight of that reality sometimes felt crushing. But she kept going. She attended every doctor's appointment, even when it meant missing work and losing pay. She read every parenting book the library had. She took prenatal vitamins and forced herself to eat properly, even when morning sickness made the thought of food unbearable. On a freezing February morning, 3 weeks before her due date, Emma's water broke while she was grocery shopping. She called Teresa, who rushed her to Northwestern Memorial Hospital. 12 hours later, after a labor that felt like it might never end, Sofia Lena Rodriguez entered the world. The moment the nurse placed that tiny, wrinkled, perfect baby in her arms, Emma understood what love really meant. Not the shallow, conditional affection Julian had offered, but something deeper and more permanent. She looked down at Sophie's small face, her eyes squeezed shut, her miniature fists waving in the air, and made a silent promise. "I will give you everything I have," Emma whispered. "You will never doubt that you are loved. Never." As she sat in that hospital bed, exhausted and terrified and more determined than she had ever been, Emma did not think about Julian Blackwood. She did not imagine him regretting his choice or coming back to apologize. She simply held her daughter close and began planning for their future, a future that belonged to them alone. Outside the hospital window, Chicago stretched out in all its winter glory, cold and unforgiving, but also full of possibility. Emma Rodriguez had been rejected and dismissed, but she had not been defeated. She had a daughter now, a reason to become stronger than she ever thought possible, and though she did not know it yet, this was only the beginning of her story. 5 years of strength. Sophie's 5th birthday fell on a Saturday in February, and Emma had been planning for weeks to make it special. Their apartment in Logan Square was small, but Emma had learned to make the most of every inch. Colorful streamers hung from the ceiling, and a homemade chocolate cake sat on the kitchen counter, decorated with purple frosting flowers that Emma had painstakingly piped the night before. The guest list was modest. Teresa and her husband brought their twin boys. Mrs. Chen from downstairs came with her grandson. 3 little girls from Sophie's kindergarten class arrived with their mothers. Women who had become Emma's unexpected support system over the past year. Emma watched Sophie blow out her candles, her dark curls bouncing with excitement, her brown eyes sparkling with pure joy. In that moment, every sacrifice felt worth it. Every double shift, every missed social event, Every night she had gone to bed exhausted beyond measure. "Make a wish, baby," Emma encouraged. Holding her phone up to capture the moment, Sophie squeezed her eyes shut tight. Her small face serious with concentration, then blew with all her might. The candles flickered and died, and the small crowd erupted in cheers. Later that evening, after the guests had left and Sophie was in bed clutching her new stuffed elephant, Emma sat at her laptop reviewing her finances. The freelance digital marketing business she had built from her living room was finally gaining real traction. 3 months ago, she had landed her first major client, a boutique hotel chain that needed a complete social media overhaul. The contract had allowed her to finally stop working her evening retail job at the bookstore. She was exhausted. It's always exhausted. But there was a difference now. It was the exhaustion of building something rather than merely surviving. A child's question Sophie had started asking about her father around her 4th birthday. At first, the questions were simple and infrequent. Why do I not have a daddy like the other kids? Emma had prepared for this moment, had rehearsed her answer countless times. She kept her voice steady and gentle. Some families have a mommy and a daddy. Some have 2 mommies or 2 daddies. Some have just one parent. Our family is you and me, and we are perfect, just the way we are. Sophie had accepted this answer for a while, but as she grew older and more observant, the questions became more pointed. One night, as Emma tucked her into bed, Sophie looked up at her with those impossibly large eyes and asked, "Did my daddy not want me?" Emma felt her heart crack open. She sat down on the edge of Sophie's small bed, choosing her words carefully. "Your daddy was not ready to be a parent, sweetheart. That is about him, not about you. You are wonderful and special and lovable. Sometimes grown-ups make choices that do not make sense, but those choices are never the fault of kids. Do you think he ever thinks about me?" Sophie asked quietly. Emma stroked her daughter's hair, fighting back tears. "I do not know, baby. But I think about you every single second of every single day. You are my whole world." Sophie seemed satisfied with this answer and drifted off to sleep. But Emma lay awake for hours afterward, wondering if she had said the right thing. Wondering if Sophie would eventually resent her for the choices she had made. Professional success by the time Sophie turned 5. Emma's business had grown beyond her wildest expectations. Word of mouth had led to more clients, and she now employed 2 part-time contractors to help manage the workload. She had moved them to a better apartment in the same neighborhood. A 2-bedroom with actual space for Sophie to play. Emma had also started teaching online courses in digital marketing through a local community college. The extra income was helpful, but more than that, she enjoyed sharing her knowledge with others who were trying to build their own paths. Teresa often joked that Emma had become the success story no one saw coming. "Remember when you could barely afford ramen noodles?" she said one afternoon as they watched their kids play at the park. "Now, you are running your own company and teaching classes. I am so proud of you." Emma smiled, but there was always a shadow behind her accomplishments. She had done it all alone, and while that filled her with pride, it also left her bone-tired in a way that sleep could never quite fix. Kindergarten. Challenges. Sophie's kindergarten teacher. Ms. Patterson had called Emma in for a conference in October. Emma's stomach had twisted with worry as she sat in the small plastic chair across from the teacher's desk. "Is Sophie in trouble?" Emma asked immediately. "No, nothing like that," Ms. Patterson assured her with a warm smile. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about how remarkably bright Sophie is. She is reading at a 2nd grade level already, and her math skills are exceptional. I think we should consider testing her for the gifted program." Relief flooded through Emma, followed quickly by a new kind of anxiety. Gifted programs meant more expenses, more time commitments, more resources she was not sure she could provide. Ms. Patterson must have seen the worry cross her face. "The district program is free," she added gently, "and there are scholarships available for enrichment activities. Sophie has real potential, Ms. Rodriguez. I just wanted to make sure you knew that." Emma had nodded, pride swelling in her chest. Sophie was thriving despite everything, or perhaps because of it. She had learned resilience by watching her mother work tirelessly. She had learned creativity by making do with secondhand toys and homemade games. She had learned love by being surrounded by it every single day. The routine that sustained them their life had fallen into a rhythm that worked, even if it was not easy. Emma woke at 5:30 each morning to get a head start on work before Sophie woke up. She made breakfast, packed lunch, and walked Sophie to school by 8. Then she worked until 3, when it was time to pick Sophie up. Evenings were sacred. They cooked dinner together, Sophie standing on a step stool to help stir or measure. They did homework side by side at the kitchen table. They read books before bed, Sophie curled against Emma's side, her small hand holding Emma's as she drifted off to sleep. Weekends were for adventures. They explored free museums, hiked forest preserve trails, and visited the library every Saturday morning without fail. Emma had learned that the best things in life truly were free, or at least affordable. And Sophie never seemed to notice what they lacked, because she was so rich in love and attention. Mrs. Chen, their elderly neighbor, had become like a grandmother to Sophie. She taught her to make dumplings and told her stories about growing up in Taiwan. On the rare occasions when Emma had to work late or had an evening class to teach, Mrs. Chen was always happy to watch Sophie. "This child is special," Mrs. Chen told Emma more than once. "You have done well, raising her alone. She has a good heart." It's unexpected strength. There were hard days, of course. Days when Sophie got sick and Emma had to cancel client meetings. Days when the bills piled up faster than the income. Days when Emma felt so overwhelmed that she locked herself in the bathroom and cried, silently so Sophie would not hear. But there were also moments of unexpected joy. The first time Sophie wrote a story at school, and the teacher displayed it on the wall with a gold star. The afternoon, Sophie used her allowance to buy Emma flowers from the bodega because you work so hard. "Mommy!" The evening they danced in their living room to old pop songs. Both of them laughing until their sides hurt. Emma had learned that strength was not about never breaking down. It was about breaking down and then getting back up, over and over again. It was about showing your child that challenges could be overcome, that love was more valuable than money. That family was not defined by biology but by commitment. On Sophie's first day of kindergarten, Emma had walked her to the classroom and watched her skip inside without a backward glance, confident and eager. Another mother had leaned over and whispered, "It is so hard to let them go, is it not?" Emma had nodded, tears in her eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of pride. She had taken a situation that could have destroyed her and turned it into something beautiful. She had raised a child who was confident, curious, and kind. As she walked home alone that day, Emma realized she no longer thought about Julian Blackwood with anger or regret. She thought about him with something closer to pity. He had chosen money and status over this, over the incomparable joy of watching Sophie grow and learn and become herself. That was his loss, not hers. Emma had built a life worth living, a life filled with purpose and love. And though the road had been harder than she ever imagined, she would not change a single thing about it. The Digital Marketing Innovation Conference was being held at the Hyatt Regency in downtown Chicago, and Emma had debated for weeks whether to attend. The registration fee was steep, but Teresa had convinced her that networking at this level could take her business to new heights. "You have outgrown the small client pool," Teresa had argued. "You need to be in rooms with people who can offer you real corporate contracts. This is your chance." So Emma had registered, bought a new suit from a consignment shop that looked expensive enough to fit in, and arranged for Mrs. Chen to pick Sophie up from school for 3 days. The conference center was massive and intimidating. Emma felt small among the crowds of polished professionals with their designer bags and confident strides. But she reminded herself that she belonged here. She had built something from nothing. She had clients who valued her work. She was not an imposter. The morning keynote was being delivered by the CEO of a major tech company. Emma found a seat in the middle section and pulled out her notepad, ready to take notes. The speaker was engaging and funny, and she found herself genuinely interested in his insights about the future of digital engagement. During the break, she headed to the networking lounge for coffee. The room was crowded with people exchanging business cards and making small talk. Emma grabbed a cup and was turning to find a quiet corner when she heard a voice that made her freeze. "I think the acquisition strategy he outlined could work, but only if the board agrees to the capital investment. What do you think, Mitchell?" Emma's hand tightened around her coffee cup. She knew that voice. It had haunted her dreams for months after Sophie was born, though she'd worked hard to forget it. She turned slowly and saw him. Julian Blackwood stood 20 feet away, looking exactly as he had 5 years ago. Perhaps a bit older around the eyes, but still devastatingly handsome in his perfectly tailored suit. He was talking to two other executives, gesturing with his hands as he made some point about market positioning. Emma's first instinct was to flee, to disappear into the crowd before he noticed her, but then something stubborn rose up inside her. She had nothing to be ashamed of. She had built a good life. She was a successful businesswoman and an excellent mother. She had no reason to hide. She straightened her shoulders and walked past his group toward the coffee station, her head held high. Emma. The words stopped her in her tracks. She turned slowly and found Julian staring at her with an expression she could not quite read. Shock, certainly, but something else underneath it. Julian, she said calmly, as if her heart was not hammering against her ribcage. The two men he had been talking to looked between them with interest. Julian cleared his throat. Mitchell Harris, would you excuse me for a moment? They nodded and moved away, leaving Emma and Julian facing each other across 5 feet of expensive carpet. I did not expect to see you here, Julian said, and there was something almost vulnerable in his voice. I am a digital marketing consultant now, Emma replied evenly. I have my own business. This seemed like a good networking opportunity. Your own business, he repeated. That is impressive. I always knew you were talented. Emma bit back the sharp retort that rose to her lips. Now was not the time or place. Thank you. If you will excuse me, I should get back to the conference. Wait, Julian said quickly. Could we talk? Maybe grab lunch between sessions. Emma studied him carefully. He looked different somehow, tired. There was a weariness around his eyes that had not been there before. I do not think that is a good idea. Please, he said, and the word sounded foreign in his mouth, as if he was not used to saying it. Just 30 minutes. I owe you that much. Against her better judgment, Emma found herself nodding. Fine, 30 minutes. There is a cafe across the street. Meet me there at noon. A conversation 5 years overdue. Emma arrived at the cafe 5 minutes early and chose a table near the window where she could watch people passing by on the street. She ordered tea and tried to calm her racing thoughts. What could Julian possibly have to say to her after all this time? He arrived exactly at noon, and Emma noted with some satisfaction that he looked nervous. Good. He should be nervous. Thank you for agreeing to meet me, Julian said as he sat down across from her. He ordered black coffee from the waitress, then turned his attention back to Emma. You look well. Really well. 5 years is a long time, Emma said neutrally. People change. They do, Julian agreed. He was quiet for a moment, stirring his coffee, even though he had not added anything to it. I have thought about you often over the years. Wondered how you were doing? But not enough to actually check, Emma said, her voice sharper than she intended. Julian flinched. No, not enough to check. I told myself that you were better off without me, that I would only complicate things. I convinced myself that my decision was the right one for everyone involved. And now, Emma asked, what has changed? Julian took a deep breath. My father had a stroke 8 months ago. Massive. He survived, but he is not the same. He cannot run the company anymore, so I took over as CEO ahead of schedule. And the thing is, Emma, I achieved everything I was working toward. The position, the power, the success. But when I am alone in my office at midnight looking at spreadsheets, I keep thinking about the cost. Emma said nothing, just watched him over the rim of her teacup. I started going to therapy, Julian continued. My doctor suggested it after I ended up in the emergency room with what I thought was a heart attack. Turned out to be a panic attack brought on by stress and anxiety. My therapist has been helping me work through a lot of things, including the choices I made 5 years ago. I'm glad you are getting help, Emma said carefully. But I'm not sure why you are telling me this. Julian met her eyes directly. Did you keep the baby? The question hung in the air between them. Emma set down her teacup with deliberate care. Yes, I have a daughter. Her name is Sophie, and she is 5 years old. The color drained from Julian's face. 5, so she is in kindergarten now. Yes, she loves school. She is reading at a 2nd grade level and is being tested for the gifted program. She is brilliant and funny and kind, and she is the best thing that ever happened to me. Julian's hands were shaking. He pressed them flat on the table. I have a daughter. No, Emma said firmly. I have a daughter. You made your choice 5 years ago when you handed me a check and told me to get rid of the problem. You do not get to claim her now. I know, Julian said quickly. I know I have no right. But Emma, please, I need to know more. Is she healthy? Is she happy? Does she need anything? She is perfectly healthy and incredibly happy, Emma said. And as for needing anything, we have managed just fine on our own. I built a successful business working from home so I could be there for her. We have a good life, Julian. We do not need you disrupting it. I am not trying to disrupt anything, Julian insisted. I just want to be part of her life, to make up for the years I lost. Emma laughed, but there was no humor in it. You cannot make up for those years. You cannot go back and hold her when she was a newborn, or comfort her through her first fever, or celebrate her first steps. Those moments are gone, Julian. You miss them, and you cannot get them back. I know that, Julian said, his voice breaking. Believe me, I know. But I want to try to be there for the moments that are left. Please, Emma, let me meet her. Let me try to be a father. Emma stood up abruptly. A father is not a biological connection, Julian. A father is someone who shows up. Someone who puts their child first. Someone who makes sacrifices. You have never done any of those things. Then let me start now, Julian pleaded. I have changed, Emma. I am not the same person I was. Maybe you have changed, Emma said, gathering her purse. But that does not mean you have earned the right to be in Sophie's life. She is happy and secure and loved. I will not risk her emotional well-being just because you are having a crisis of conscience. She started to walk away, but Julian's next words stopped her. What if I could prove that I have changed? What if I could show you that I am serious about this? Emma turned back slowly. How exactly do you plan to prove that? Julian stood up, his expression desperate and determined. However long it takes. Whatever you need to see. I will do it, Emma. Just give me a chance. The careful beginning over the next 3 months, Julian did something Emma never expected. He showed up. He started by making a substantial donation to Sophie's school in Emma's name, funding new computers for the library and art supplies for the classrooms. When Emma confronted him about it, he held up his hands in surrender. I am not trying to buy my way in, he said. I just wanted to help in a way that would benefit Sophie and her classmates. No strings attached. He also started volunteering at a nonprofit that provided mentorship to single mothers building businesses. Emma only found out about it when Teresa showed her an article in a local business magazine featuring Julian and several of the women he had been mentoring. He is really trying, Teresa said, showing Emma the article on her phone. Look at this quote. I spent years focused solely on my own success. But real fulfillment comes from helping others achieve theirs. That does not sound like the man you described. Emma had to admit that Julian's actions were consistent. He did not push. He did not demand. He simply demonstrated through his behavior that he was capable of putting others first. After 8 weeks of this, Emma finally agreed to let him meet Sophie, but only in a neutral setting with Emma present, meeting his daughter. They arranged to meet at the Lincoln Park Zoo on a sunny Saturday afternoon. Emma and Sophie arrived first, and Emma knelt down to look her daughter in the eye. Remember what we talked about? Emma said gently. There is someone I want you to meet today. A man named Julian. Is he nice? Sophie asked, clutching her stuffed elephant. I think he is trying to be, Emma said honestly. But if you feel uncomfortable at any time, you tell me, and we will leave right away. Okay? Sophie nodded seriously, then brightened as she spotted the sea lions. Can we watch them first? They were standing by the sea lion pool when Julian arrived. Emma saw him before Sophie did, and she watched his face as he got his first look at his daughter. The expression of wonder and regret and love that crossed his features was so raw that Emma had to look away. Hi, Julian said softly, approaching slowly. Sophie looked up at him with curious eyes. Are you Julian? I am, he said, crouching down to her level. And you must be Sophie. Your mom told me you like animals? Sophie nodded enthusiastically. I want to be a veterinarian when I grow up. I am going to help all the sick animals get better. That is a wonderful dream, Julian said, and his voice was thick with emotion. I bet you would be great at that. They walked through the zoo together, Sophie chattering away about each animal they saw. Julian listened with complete attention, asking questions and genuinely engaging with her childish observations. Emma watched carefully, looking for any sign of discomfort from Sophie. But her daughter seemed at ease. At the penguin exhibit, Sophie suddenly asked, "Are you my daddy?" Emma's heart stopped. They had not planned to tell her today. It was too soon, but Julian handled it perfectly. He glanced at Emma for permission, and at her slight nod, he answered honestly, "Yes, Sophie, I am your biological father, but I know that is confusing because I have not been around. I made some mistakes before you were born, and I am trying to fix them now. But I understand if you need time to think about what that means." Sophie considered this seriously. "Mommy says people can make mistakes and still be good if they try to do better." "Your mommy is very wise," Julian said, his eyes meeting Emma's over Sophie's head. A new beginning in the weeks that followed. Julian became a careful, consistent presence in Sophie's life. He attended her school's spring performance. He took her to the aquarium and listened patiently as she explained the difference between various types of fish. He read to her when Emma allowed brief visits to their apartment. Emma watched all of this with a guarded heart. She could see that Julian genuinely cared about Sophie, but she remained wary. People could act a certain way when they wanted something, only to revert back to their true nature once they felt secure. One evening, after Julian had read Sophie 3 bedtime stories and she had finally drifted off to sleep, Emma and Julian sat in her small living room drinking tea. "She is remarkable," Julian said quietly. "You have done an incredible job raising her, Emma." "Thank you," Emma said. "It has not been easy, but it has been worth every difficult moment." Julian set down his cup and turned to face her fully. "I know I can never make up for the years I missed. I know I hurt you in ways that cannot be erased. But I want you to know that I am committed to this. To being a real father to Sophie, and to earning your trust back, however long that takes." Emma studied his face, searching for any sign of insincerity. But all she saw was honest remorse and genuine determination. "Actions speak louder than words," Emma said finally. "You have made a good start, Julian, but this cannot be a temporary interest. Sophie needs consistency. She needs to know that you will be there not just when it is convenient, but when it is hard. When she is sick at 3 in the morning, when she has a bad dream, when she needs help with homework on a night when you have important work to do." "I understand," Julian said, "and I am ready for all of that. I have restructured my work schedule. I have hired a new deputy at the company to handle the day-to-day operations that kept me working 80 hours a week. I have made space in my life for what really matters." Emma nodded slowly. "Then we will take this one day at a time. But know this, Julian. If you ever hurt her, if you ever make her feel like she is not enough or not important, you will never get another chance. She is my priority. She always has been, and she always will be." "As she should be," Julian agreed. "She is my priority now too. I promise you that." Looking forward 6 months after their reunion at the conference, Emma stood in her kitchen making breakfast while Sophie sat at the table drawing pictures. Julian was coming by that morning to take Sophie to a science museum exhibit she had been excited about for weeks. Emma had finally allowed overnight visits, though she had been anxious about it at first. But Sophie always came home happy, full of stories about what she and her dad had done. Julian had converted his spare bedroom into a space for Sophie, decorated with her favorite colors and filled with books and art supplies. There was a knock at the door, and Sophie jumped up. "Daddy is here." Emma watched through the window as Sophie ran to hug Julian, and he scooped her up, spinning her around as she giggled. The easy affection between them was undeniable. He had earned it through consistent presence and genuine care. Julian caught Emma's eye through the window and smiled. It was a different smile than the one she remembered from 5 years ago. It was warmer, more open, less calculated. Emma smiled back, a small, genuine smile. She had not forgiven him completely. Perhaps she never would. The pain he had caused was too deep to simply disappear. But she could acknowledge his efforts. She could appreciate the father he was becoming to Sophie as she watched them drive away, Sophie waving enthusiastically from the back seat, or reflected on how far they had all come. She had started as a frightened young woman holding a check she refused to cash. She had built herself into a successful businesswoman and devoted mother. Julian had transformed from a cold corporate climber into someone capable of real love and sacrifice. And Sophie. Beautiful Sophie had two parents who loved her fiercely. Even if they had taken a painful and complicated path to get there, Emma picked up her phone and texted Julian, "Have fun today. Be safe." His response came quickly. "Always. Thank you for trusting me with her. It means everything." Emma set down her phone and looked around her apartment. It was not fancy, but it was filled with love and laughter and memories. She had created this life through sheer determination and endless love. Julian's rejection 5 years ago could have destroyed her. Instead, it had forged her into someone stronger than she ever knew she could be. And now, unexpectedly, they were finding their way towards something new. Not the romance they once had, that was gone forever, but something perhaps more valuable. A partnership built on mutual respect and shared love for their daughter. Emma poured herself a cup of coffee and sat down at her laptop. She had work to do, a business to run, a life to live. But for the first time in 5 years, she felt like she could breathe a little easier. The weight she had been carrying alone was now shared, and that made all the difference. Sophie was happy. That was what mattered most. And Emma had learned the most important lesson of all. Love was not about perfect circumstances or ideal timing. Love was about showing up, doing the work, and choosing to be present every single day. She had done that for 5 years alone. And now, finally, Julian was learning to do it too. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you've enjoyed this content, don't forget to click like, share this story with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more meaningful stories.